The first thing they noticed was the silence. Not the kind that hung heavy in old houses, but the surgical, unnatural silence of a room too perfect, too still. No hum of the AC, no creaking floors, just a faint coppery smell and a soft hiss from the steam rising off a mug of untouched Earl Grey. Elwood Glass had vanished. 60 stories above Manhattan, in a penthouse no man could enter without a retina scan, and a dozen clearances the billionaire tech recluse was gone. And all he left behind was a smear of blood on the gilded mirror. Detective Julian Mace wasn't supposed to be there. Not anymore. He'd walked away from the force 5 years earlier, burned out, disillusioned, and haunted by a profile he got wrong. Fatally wrong. But this wasn't an ordinary missing person case. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't suicide. It was a puzzle. And Mace was a man addicted to unsolvable things. The apartment was still locked from the inside. No forced entry. Security footage showed Elwood walking in at 9:42 p.m. sharp, wearing a charcoal robe, holding a black knight chess piece in his right hand. The cameras cut out at 9:47 p.m. When they came back on at 11:03, the room was empty. Not a trace of struggle. No broken glass, no open windows, not even a smudge on the floor. Just the blood on the mirror and a chessboard laid out mid-game, missing exactly one pawn. Julian stood in the center of the room, the skyline flickering behind him. He stared at the mirror. The smear was precise, angled upward, like someone had touched it just before being yanked away. The tea on the desk was still hot. The book beside it, Gödel, Escher, Bach, was bookmarked at page 241. And across the room near the window a single white feather lay on the floor. "You said he was alone?" Julian asked. The housekeeper nodded. "He never allowed visitors, not up here, not in the penthouse. And the cameras? Scrambled, no data. Who called it in? No one. The morning chef came up and found the room this way." Julian turned back to the chessboard. Elwood Glass had built a fortune on systems, algorithms, encryption, prediction engines. He didn't make random moves. If he vanished, it was for a reason. And Julian intended to find it, even if it meant staring into the mirror until it bled answers. The building's security system was called Argus, named after the 100-eyed giant from Greek myth. Fitting, since it watched everything. Except this. Julian stood in the control room 3 floors down from Elwood's penthouse, watching the grainy footage from the night before. 42 cameras. Not one showed a door open, a window slide, or a shadow move. Elwood entered, Elwood never left. "You sure this hasn't been tampered with?" Julian asked. The security chief, a square-jawed man named Weller, gave a stiff nod. "Triple-backed servers. Offline redundancy. We ran diagnostics. No breach." Julian rubbed his chin. Then he either disappeared into thin air, or someone figured out how to fool the gods. Back in the penthouse, he did another sweep. He touched nothing. But he noticed everything. The blood smear had tiny striations at the edge, as if someone had tried to wipe it, and then stopped. The chessboard had been disturbed, slightly. The knight had moved 1 square forward. The missing pawn still hadn't been found. He turned his attention to the glass desk beside the window. One drawer was locked. No keyhole, no scanner. Seamless. He tapped it once. Nothing. Twice he saw a faint click. The drawer opened an inch. Inside, a single envelope sealed in wax with the image of an owl. No name, no address. Inside, 1 line, printed neatly on heavy paper. "He who plays both sides must one day face both consequences." Julian exhaled slowly. This wasn't just disappearance. This was performance. And Elwood Glass had written the first act himself. The building architect arrived that afternoon. An older woman named Carlotta Ames with eyes like razors. "No secret doors," she insisted. "Everyone says that until there's a body in the wall," Julian said. She didn't smile. "I designed this tower from bedrock to lightning rod. There are no hidden corridors, no hatches, no trapdoors." "What about vents? Service shafts?" "Too narrow. Not even a cat could crawl through them." Julian looked back at the sealed windows. Not a scratch. That night, Julian returned to the mirror. He turned off the lights. Used a forensic light wand, standard issue. A faint handprint glowed beside the blood smear. But it was upside down. As if someone had been suspended, head down, when they touched it. Or as if the room itself had been turned. Or deceived. Julian stepped back and stared at the mirror again. That's when he noticed it. The faintest flicker. A reflection that didn't match the room. A door that wasn't there. And a figure, standing just behind him, but when he turned around, the room was empty. Julian didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in guilt, in motive, in flesh and blood lies disguised as coincidence. But as he stood in the penthouse with the phantom of a reflection still burned into his mind, he realized one thing. Elwood Glass wanted to be found, or rather, wanted someone to try. The next morning, Julian walked back into the NYPD Major Crimes Division. The same walls, same smell of burnt coffee and dying ambition. Faces turned as he entered, some surprised, others annoyed. He headed straight for the glass office with the name Captain Loretta Vance stenciled in gold. "You back for real?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "One case," Julian said. "You don't get to choose now. I already chose. It chose me." "Elwood Glass?" she said, finally looking at him. "You're not even cleared for active field work." Julian dropped a file on her desk. Elwood's photo paperclipped to the top. "I was the one he contacted last year." That got her attention. "What do you mean?" "Private message, no reply address, just one sentence. If anything ever happens to me, find the knight." "The chess piece?" Julian nodded. "I didn't know what it meant. I thought it was paranoia. Now I'm not so sure." Vance leaned back. "You're walking a thin line, Mace. Just keep the other suits out of my way until I cross it." Back in his brownstone apartment, Julian pulled out a locked case from under his bed. Inside, a corkboard covered in strings, notes, photos, dozens of cold cases he never let go, and at the center, a manila envelope labeled EG in red ink. He pinned the blood mirror, the chessboard, and the owl-sealed envelope beside it. What connected them? And why was Elwood playing a game when his life was at stake? Julian returned to the tower at dusk. The air on the 60th floor felt wrong, like the pressure had changed. He opened the blinds. Saw nothing but the city. Then he noticed the chessboard again. Another piece had moved. The bishop was now in a threatening position. And on the desk, next to the cup of tea, lay a small, metallic object he hadn't seen before. A knight, but not the one from the board. This one was made of brushed steel, no base. He picked it up. The bottom clicked open. Inside was a slip of paper, folded tight. It read, "She always wore blue velvet when she lied." Julian closed his eyes. That wasn't a riddle. That was a memory. And it didn't belong to Elwood. It belonged to Julian. Julian stared at the note like it had fangs. She always wore blue velvet when she lied. It wasn't just a memory. It was a trigger. A whisper from a case that had collapsed 5 years ago, dragging his career down with it. The Wilshire widow, a woman who conned and killed 3 husbands, each with the same lie, each with the same dress. Julian had profiled her and let her go. The chessboard beckoned. He sat at the desk, careful not to touch the pieces yet. It was a standard Staunton board, but something was off. The bishop's new position placed it in line with the queen, 2 moves from check. And yet the black king wasn't in sight. He scanned the board again. The king piece was gone. Julian checked under the table, the floor, even inside the tea mug. Nothing. But on the underside of the board, etched faintly, was a sequence of chess notations: F4 E5, NF3, NC6 BB5. The RUY Lopez opening. Classic, precise, aggressive, and incomplete. The next move was missing. Just a blank square where the 6th notation should be. He opened his phone and messaged Carlotta Ames, the architect. Need original penthouse blueprints, especially air vents and shafts. No reply. He called. Voicemail. Julian turned back to the room and scanned the walls. Then it hit him. The mirror. He stepped close, not to the smear but the frame. The ornate trim was modeled in silver and engraved with filigree symbols, not just design. Chess notation. Etched faintly, QG4, queen to G4. He flipped open his notebook. The board now showed an invisible queen move, and with it, checkmate, except there was no king, because Elwood Glass never played the king. He played the villain. Julian reached into the drawer again. The envelope was still there, but now something was pressed against the back wall. A second letter, taped into the velvet lining. He peeled it off. Typed text. Same thick paper. Same owl seal. The knight is not a piece, it's the player. He doesn't move like others. He leaps. Look left, the queen lies. Julian stepped back. He looked left. At the large, lifelike portrait of a woman in a navy blue dress, painted with delicate hands. Smiling, just slightly. She wore a velvet choker. He'd seen that face before. But not in any photo of Elwood Glass. He saw it once in a case file. The Wilshire widow. She was supposed to be in hiding. Supposed to be dead. But her face was staring at him now, oil-painted and smug. And the artist's signature at the corner? E.G. Julian stood frozen before the painting. The woman's smile was maddening, half saint, half snake. Eyes that had seduced jurors, bankrolled poison, and walked out of a courtroom untouched. Now she was framed in oils on the wall of a man who had vanished without a trace. Elwood Glass painted her. But why? Was she a muse or a warning? Julian pulled out his tablet and ran a visual match. The algorithm flickered. A result pinged. Margot Lark. Alias, Viola Kane, Susan Everly, the Wilshire widow. Deceased, at least officially. The body had washed up near Santa Cruz 6 months ago, too decomposed for ID. Case closed by dental records and a locket, both easily forged. Julian hadn't believed it then. Now he was certain she was alive. And she'd been in this room. He tapped the canvas. A soft knock. The frame echoed strangely. He pulled it from the wall. Behind it, an embedded safe. No dial, just a touchpad. No clues. He returned to the chessboard. QG4. Queen to G4. Julian keyed in. QG4, a beep, green light. The safe clicked open. Inside was a manila folder labeled Glass Lark Stratagem. He flipped it open. Dozens of surveillance photos. Margot Lark entering hotels, boarding planes, meeting men, and in the corner of every photo, a silver night charm on her wrist. Julian squinted. The same as the steel knight he'd found. Was it a tracker? A key? Or something more intimate? At the bottom of the folder was a note, handwritten. If you're reading this, Julian, then the Queen's made her final move. I'm the pawn now, but I know how to cross the board. She never works alone, not anymore. Look for the other knight. Signed, E.G. Julian sat back, heart pounding. Elwood knew her, feared her, maybe loved her, and now he was hiding from her, or running with her, or already dead. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Silence. Then, "The night doesn't leap twice, detective. You of all people should remember that." Click. Dead air. Julian stared at the phone. It wasn't her voice. It was male. And familiar. But not from the past. From this case. Someone inside the tower. Someone playing both sides. Julian returned to the penthouse just past midnight. The lights were off, the moon casting pale slats through the blinds. The room felt colder than it should have. Still, heavy, like something had been disturbed. He moved slowly, scanning for changes. The tea mug was gone. The chessboard untouched. But the mirror. The blood smear had dried now, reflected something that made his breath catch. Not the room, not himself, but shapes overhead. He turned his gaze up slowly. And there they were. Footprints. Faint black smudges along the ceiling, like someone or something had walked across it. Impossible angles, spaced too widely for a normal stride. No ladders, no support, just the ghost of movement where no one should have been. He pulled a chair, climbed up, and dabbed a swab against the closest print. Fine black powder. Soot? Paint? Or something engineered? Back on the floor, he bagged the sample and turned to the walls. The portrait of Margot Lark was gone. Only the hook remained. And something else, a phrase, scrawled in lipstick on the bare wall. The Queen rules when the king is lost. It wasn't a taunt. It was a countdown. Julian's phone lit up with a single text. You're already in check. No number, no trace, but the implication was clear. They were watching him. Playing him. Like another piece on their board. The security chief, Weller, hadn't answered calls since the day before. Julian dug into his file. Military background, high-end private security, no criminal record. Too clean. And in one image from a prior assignment, Weller wore a ring. Not just any ring, a chess knight embossed in black on silver. The second knight, or something more. Julian returned to his office, every instinct pulsing. He printed out the footprints, mirrored the photo, and that's when he noticed it. The prints weren't random. They formed the outline of a knight's L-shaped path over and over across the ceiling. Like a message in code. Like someone had walked the move. One more photo in the case file caught his attention. Margot and Elwood together, half obscured in a cafe window reflection. He enhanced it. Behind them, a third person. Out of focus, but clearly watching. Male, glasses, sharp jaw. He cross-referenced the face. Match found. Dr. Seth Darrow, neuroarchitect, memory specialist. Disgraced, then disappeared. Last seen on payroll at Glass Technologies 6 months ago. Julian closed his eyes. 3 pieces. 2 knights, 1 queen. and no king on the board, because the king had already fallen. Julian knocked on the modest green door of apartment 3B, Lower East Side. A brass plate read, M. Reyes, housekeeper of Elwood Glass for 8 years, the last person to see him alive. She opened the door slowly, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, not surprised, not afraid, just tired. "You shouldn't be here, Detective," she said. "You were in that penthouse the morning after the vanishing," Julian replied. "And you haven't been back since. That's strange." "Strange things happen around that man," she muttered. "They always have." Inside, her apartment was neat, spare, and smelled of rosewater and ammonia. A clock ticked softly in the corner, the only sound besides the wind against the window panes. Julian sat across from her as she poured tea. No milk, no sugar. "You found the chessboard?" she asked, not looking at him. "Yes." "Was the king missing?" Julian nodded. "That means he expected someone to play without him. You understand the board. He taught me, said it was the only game honest about war." Julian reached into his coat, pulled out the photo of Dr. Seth Darrow, the memory architect. "Do you know him?" Her hands froze midair. "He used to come by, always after dark, never spoke, just stared at the mirror, him and the woman in blue. Margot Lark. That wasn't the name she used." "What was?" "She called herself Aveline, said it meant a little bird." Julian's blood chilled. Aveline was the name from his old profile, the Wilshire case, the name the killer used once, the name she whispered to Julian before walking free. This wasn't coincidence. This was deliberate. "Do you believe Elwood's dead?" he asked. "No," Reyes said softly. "But he's not alive in the way you mean." "What do you mean?" She reached for a small wooden box beneath the coffee table. Inside, a chess knight. Glass. Frosted. Identical to the others, but with a tiny camera embedded in the eye. "He gave this to me the week before he vanished, said if anyone ever asked the wrong questions I should give it to the one who asked the right ones." Julian took the knight. "And I asked the right ones." "You asked why, not how." As he left the apartment, the sky had turned steel gray. Julian turned the knight over and saw a word etched on the base. Mimir. The Norse god of knowledge and memory. Another riddle. Another door. And somewhere behind it, the line between what was real and what was constructed had begun to blur. Julian didn't go home. He went straight to the archives office at Glass Technologies, a towering vault of servers and silence hidden beneath the company's public labs. The name Mimir matched a private server Elwood had maintained for years, locked behind 7 layers of encryption. But Julian still had his badge from when he consulted with them on security protocols. And Elwood had left a back door. It took an hour, a bypassed retina scanner, and an outdated fingerprint token Elwood had gifted him years ago. The server sprang to life. Inside, just one folder. For Mace. He opened it. A series of PDFs, financial records, travel logs, encrypted memos, and a digital copy of Elwood Glass's will, last modified one day before he disappeared. But there was a catch. The document was redacted. Nearly everything blurred out, except for one section. "In the event of my death or confirmed absence, my intellectual property shall pass to the 2 knights, in equal measure with one clause. Only the queen may surrender control by checkmate willingly or otherwise." Julian reread it. This wasn't a legal clause. It was a message. A game still being played. He ran the phrase through a cipher tool. Substitution. Rot 13. Nothing worked. Then he looked again. The first letter of each sentence in the will's side notes, barely visible in the margins, spelled out Glassshall, Glass Hall, the private exhibition space Elwood built on the 41st floor, reserved for VIPs and never open to the public. Julian had never been inside. Until now. He rode the private elevator up, used the override key hidden in the night token. The doors opened into a cavernous gallery made of mirrored walls and polished marble. Every reflection fractured the room into infinity. And at the center, beneath a single spotlight, stood a chess table. 2 chairs, 1 game, ongoing. This one wasn't just mid-game, it was nearly complete. White, Elwood, was down to a knight and a bishop. Black, the queen's side, was fully armed. The imbalance was intentional. Julian stepped closer and noticed that the white bishop had Elwood's initials carved into the base. And the black queen. It bore the same velvet choker etched onto the piece. Margot. Beneath the table was a drawer. Inside, a flash drive. Julian plugged it into his tablet. A single file. A video. He hit play. Elwood appeared on screen. Gaunt. Calm. A storm behind his eyes. If you're watching this, Julian, then she's made her move. The queen doesn't win by force. She wins by making you forget who you are. She's rewriting me, in pieces, taking memory, injecting lies. But I've encoded myself in this game. Checkmate isn't the end, it's the escape. But only if you remember who's really playing. Julian froze. The night, the game, the false death. None of this was random. Margot, or Aveline, wasn't just a killer. She was building a system, a new kind of prison. One inside the mind. Julian didn't sleep. He sat in the gallery, the mirrored walls warping his reflection 1,000 ways, each one more fragmented than the last. The chessboard was no longer a game. It was a map. He replayed Elwood's message. She's rewriting me. What did that mean? Julian dug into Glass Technology's archived research. Buried beneath patents and neural net modules, he found a series of classified projects under the codename Athena. Lead contributor, Dr. Seth Darrow. Subheading, Cognitive Pattern Restructuring Memory Integration. Translation, Memory Engineering. Julian remembered the headlines. Glass Tech's memory research halted after ethical concerns. Experimentation without consent. The story disappeared after a week, swept away like everything Elwood wanted forgotten. But now, Julian knew, it wasn't about making people remember better. It was about making them remember wrong. He printed the lab notes, decrypted the cache. Dozens of files referred to Subject Z, no birth name. High emotional volatility, exceptional memory retention. High susceptibility to sensory cues. Julian stopped cold. The subject's primary trigger? Blue velvet. It wasn't Margot's alias. It was her design. Aveline wasn't just surviving. She was testing, and Elwood had been her favorite subject. At 3:14 a.m., Julian's phone buzzed. An email, no sender. Subject line, you left this behind. Attachment, a photograph. Julian, younger, in a hotel hallway. Suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. Next to him, Aveline, hand on his chest, whispering something in his ear. But Julian had no memory of this. He zoomed in. Her lips were curved in the same half-smile as the portrait. And in her other hand, a silver knight, just like the one he now carried. He felt the room tilt. This wasn't her plan alone. She had included him from the start, manipulated him, wound him like a clock. And if she had engineered his memories, what else did she build? What else had she buried? Julian drove to the river at dawn, to the bench where they'd first met, 5 years ago, before the Wilshire case collapsed, before his life unraveled. It was still there. So was the old plaque beneath it. He read it again, in memory of Emily Mace, who loved riddles more than roses, his sister, the reason he became a detective, the first case he never solved. He knelt, ran his fingers beneath the bench. There, taped underneath a folded page, old, weathered, written in Emily's hand. If you're reading this, Jules, it means the Queen reached you too. She's been moving for longer than you think. Don't follow the pieces, follow the player. Julian rose, wind biting through his coat. His sister knew. So had Elwood, but he had to remember on his own, because only then could he see the one thing they couldn't, that this wasn't a game anymore. It was a trap. The elevator to the penthouse groaned like it hadn't moved in days. Julian stood inside, holding the folded note from his sister like it might vanish if he blinked. Don't follow the pieces, follow the player. That was the key. Elwood was the illusion. Aveline, Margot, was the architect. But the real player, he was starting to suspect it wasn't either of them. Back in the penthouse, the chessboard remained untouched. The dried blood on the mirror now looked almost ornamental. Julian took a breath and turned toward the wall behind the wine cabinet. He'd noticed it on day one, slightly shallower than the others, the baseboards not perfectly aligned. He pressed his palm against the corner. A faint click, then silence. Another click, lower. He knelt, felt along the base, and there it was. A groove. He pulled. A small panel popped open. Inside, a dark cavity, no bigger than a crawlspace. A trapdoor. He slipped on gloves and reached in with a flashlight. A tight shaft descended into blackness, lined with steel. Not in the original building blueprints, probably not legal, definitely not accidental. He climbed in. The hatch sealed shut behind him with a hiss. The descent was tight, metallic, quiet, except for his own breath. He dropped down one level, then two. He estimated he was now around floor 55. At the bottom, a hatch, unlocked. He pushed it open. A small chamber awaited. Walls painted obsidian black, lined with servers and flickering monitors. A control room. And seated in the center, back to him, was a man in a gray suit, unmoving. Julian raised his voice. Turn around. No response. He stepped closer. Dr. Darrow. Still nothing. Julian rounded the chair and froze. It was Darrow, or what was left of him. Eyes wide, pupils dilated, a faint smile on his lips. A steel wire around his throat looped with precision. In his lap, a single chess piece, the king. Its base was etched with 3 words, "No one wins." Julian backed away slowly. The monitors flickered. Then one lit up. A recording began to play. Aveline's voice. "Hello again, Julian. You're close now. Close enough to understand this was never about Elwood or me. It was about you. What do you remember about the Wilshire case, about that missing night? You asked the wrong questions. You let me walk. But you didn't forget. You were rewritten." The screen cut to black. Then text appeared. Pawn promoted. Julian felt a chill run through him. He hadn't solved the case 5 years ago because the case was still happening. And he wasn't the knight. He was the pawn, being moved, piece by piece. Julian stumbled from the chamber like a man crawling out of a dream. The image of Dr. Darrow, lifeless, smiling, crowned by Chess King, clung to him like a shroud. And the voice in the recording, Aveline. Calm, knowing, too knowing. She hadn't just outplayed him. She had rewritten him. And now she was telling him where to look next. Back in his apartment, Julian locked the door, drew the blinds, and dumped every file he had on Elwood Glass, Margot Lark, and the Wilshire case across the floor. There was a pattern buried in the noise. Aveline didn't kill for money. She killed for identity. Each time, she left behind someone else's truth, someone else's past, and every time, the records erased her real one. Julian found the lead buried in a court document from 17 years ago, Lark versus State, a guardianship dispute. 2 minors, Margot Lark and her twin sister. Name redacted. No further record. He dug deeper. Hospital archives, foster system, psychiatric evaluations. Then he found it. A single intake form at a private care facility in Vermont, signed under the name Eve Lark. The patient's note: chronic dissociation, high intellect, obsession with patterns and duality, claims not to exist. No known discharge date. Just a stamp, discontinued file subject released to family. Year 2019. Julian's breath slowed. Aveline wasn't Margot. Aveline was the twin. The one no one tracked. The one who watched from the shadows while her sister lived, seduced, and vanished. And now that twin had taken over the role completely. She had become the queen. Elwood wasn't just hiding. He was hiding from her. Julian opened the final file Elwood had sent to the Mimir server, encrypted and time-locked until today. It was a video. Elwood, thinner now, eyes lined with fear. Julian, if you're watching this, you've come farther than I thought. She took Margot's face, her voice, her memories. She even took mine. But you're still in the game. She'll come for you now, because you're the last piece. Remember who you are before she finishes the rewrite. Julian closed the laptop. A knock echoed from his front door. Slow, measured, he drew his sidearm, stepped close, looked through the peephole. No one. Then, as he turned, he saw it a reflection in the hallway mirror. A woman in a velvet blue coat. Smiling, holding a silver knight. Julian didn't open the door. He stood frozen, breath shallow, watching the mirror. The woman stared back, her smile calm, her posture regal, the knight in her hand gleaming under the hallway light. Not a threat, not a scream. Just presence. The queen had arrived. He turned from the door and walked to his desk, heart racing, mind clearer than it had been in days. He pulled the flash drive from his jacket, inserted it into the tablet, and loaded Elwood's final file. Inside it, a single sentence. The queen must move last. It was a rule, a law of the game Elwood built around her. And she, Aveline, Eve, whatever she called herself, was following it to the letter. Julian returned to the hallway. The woman was gone. But on the floor lay the silver knight, placed gently on the tile. He picked it up. Inside the base, folded tightly, was a final note. You were never the pawn, Julian. You were the mirror. We only needed you to reflect the game back. And now the world will believe what you do, because they trust you. Julian felt the room sway. That was the final move. Not murder, not disappearance, belief. Aveline didn't just rewrite memories. She rewrote perception. The goal was never just Elwood's silence. It was Julian's validation. His word would confirm her version of reality. And that made him more dangerous than a gun, a knife, or poison. Back at Glass Hall, he entered the mirrored gallery one last time. The chessboard remained. Final move pending. White bishop ready, knight beside it. Black queen looming. No king. Julian reached down and removed both the queen and the knight. He placed them beside the board, and then took the bishop, Elwood's piece, and made the final move. Checkmate, not by power, but by sacrifice. A screen lit behind the wall. Elwood's voice. If the knight walks off the board, the game ends. A hiss echoed from below. A vault opened in the floor. Julian stepped down into the light and found Elwood Glass, weak, gaunt, but alive. Aveline had hidden him within his own system, using him to feed her network of misinformation. Now the board was cleared, and the game over. 2 weeks later, the press reported Elwood's return. Margot Lark's false death was exposed, and Julian Mace, once a broken man, stood at the center of the storm, the only one who had seen the truth all the way to the end. But in the quiet of his apartment, one thought haunted him. How many mirrors are still out there? Because Eve Lark wasn't dead. She was just waiting for the next board, and maybe this time she'd play both sides. Margot Lark's false death was exposed, and Julian Mace, once a broken man, stood at the center of the storm, the only one who had seen the truth all the way to the end. But in the quiet of his apartment, one thought haunted him. How many mirrors are still out there? Because Eve Lark wasn't dead. She was just waiting for the next board, and maybe this time she'd play both sides.